Greetings. The earliest state in the Nile Valley emerged in the 4th millennium BCE and endured until 525 BCE when Egypt was conquered by the Persian Empire. In its development, the Egyptian army went through several stages. During the early and ancient periods, 3rd millennium BCE, Egypt did not have a regular army. Military units consisted of militias. Armaments included throwing clubs, spears, short swords and daggers, cudgels for hand-to-hand combat, as well as primitive bows for long-distance fighting. Throwing clubs were wooden objects shaped like boomerangs. The effective range of this boomerang reached up to 50 meters. In combat, this weapon was inefficient, but simple and lightweight to manufacture and use. The spear, just over 2 meters long, consisted of a wooden shaft and a flint tip inserted into the shaft. Toward the end of the period, copper spearheads appeared. This spear was used both in close combat and for throwing, with a throwing range not exceeding 50 meters. However, spears easily broke upon contact, and therefore this weapon was not particularly effective. As additional weapons, there were short swords and even shorter daggers. Both were rough copper blades attached to a handle. The dagger was used either at very close range or for finishing off wounded enemies. The blades were too fragile, and upon striking bone or another blade, they often broke. The sword was an elongated dagger designed for slashing attacks. However, because the blades were attached to the handles rather than cast as a single piece, swords were prone to breaking when attempting to block an incoming strike. Some foot soldiers were armed with a mace. Mace heads were made either of hard wood or of pear-shaped stone. The mace could be used to pierce enemy shields or dispatch wounded enemies with a single swift blow to the skull. Archers were armed with bows made of wood, with arrows made of reeds with flint or copper tips. These bows were difficult to draw, effective at distances of up to only 150 meters, and even then were not very accurate. Arrows were carried in a long quiver slung over the back on a strap. Moreover, the army leadership didn't even attempt to teach archers the basics of shooting, or at least recruit personnel from hunters with experience in using this weapon. Therefore, in addition to the shortcomings of the bow itself, there was the incompetence of the archers in handling it. As for defensive armament, it was minimal, to say the least. Most soldiers went barefoot and wore loincloths or, at best, short skirts. Some had shields, rectangular in shape, consisting of a wooden frame covered with cowhide. As seen from this description, the early and New Kingdom Egyptian army did not impress with its combat qualities. However, the military opponents of Egypt during this period, mainly neighboring tribes such as the Nubians and Ethiopians, also did not awe with their military might. However, on the threshold of the Middle Kingdom, from the late 3rd century, the Egyptian army began to encounter much better prepared inhabitants of Asia, prompting a certain reorganization of the army and the introduction of new types of weapons. The armament of Egyptian warriors during the Middle Kingdom period improved somewhat compared to the previous period as metalworking became more advanced. Infantrymen received a new, much more effective weapon, the battleaxe. It consisted of a long wooden shaft with a copper crescent-shaped blade inserted into a notch at one end. The weapon needed to be held with both hands, making swinging motions, almost like a scythe, moving from side to side. The weapon was extremely effective. Its heavy weight and inertia meant that defending against an approaching blow was practically impossible. Archers still carried the same single-bow bows as before. They had all the same drawbacks. However, the Egyptian army became much better at utilizing this far from ideal weapon. Archers were now better trained and organized. As for defensive armament, armor made of fabric soaked in animal glue and leather shirts appeared. These so-called cuirasses protected against glancing blows and arrows in flight. The protection was not great, but still better than nothing. Shields consisted of 3 wooden planks glued together and covered with animal skins and fur. They could already provide some protection, especially when infantry formed their ranks resembling a phalanx. During the New Kingdom era, 1550 to 1069 BCE, Egypt had to face adversaries whose defeat could have led to the dissolution of the Egyptian state. These included the Hittites, who attempted to conquer Egypt, as well as the so-called Sea Peoples, who invaded Egypt in the 13th century. The reorganized Egyptian army not only managed to defend Egypt, but also achieved significant conquests in Asia. During this period, the Egyptian army represented a formidable force. Whereas previously, the main composition of the army consisted of militias called up in times of war, during the New Kingdom era, a professional army was created. In the new army, we encounter traditional but highly modernized types and completely new types of weaponry. Among the traditional types, I'll mention the mace, which received a second life. In the New Kingdom era, this deadly weapon was substantially improved by adding a curved blade embedded in a solid wooden head. This axe mace was wielded with 2 hands, delivering blows of monstrous force capable of penetrating even the toughest bronze armor. The traditional spear was improved upon. Egyptians learned to forge bronze spearheads with a hollow socket tightly fitted to a wooden shaft. This weapon served a dual purpose. They could be used as close combat spears or launched at enemy chariots and troops. It's important to note that javelins were equipped with diamond-shaped metal blades, possessing armor-piercing capabilities. Soldiers carried a quiver of javelins on their shoulder. Unlike arrows, this weapon was reusable. As Egyptian troops advanced, they could retrieve discarded javelins. The battleaxe underwent a transformation. In the Middle Kingdom era, axe blades had semicircular or crescent shapes and were designed to inflict deep, slashing wounds on unprotected flesh. However, during the New Kingdom, when Egypt faced Hittite and Syrian armies wearing protective leather jackets with iron plates, axe blades were made narrow and straight, suitable for piercing armor. New types of weaponry became true wonders, primarily the bronze Khopesh Sword. It was entirely cast from bronze, and its handle was then wrapped in leather and cloth. This eliminated the need for rivets connecting the handle to the blade, significantly increasing the durability and striking power of the sword. The Khopesh was a highly curved, sickle-shaped sword. The blade length ranged from 50 to 60 centimeters, and it weighed 2 kilograms. Strikes with this sword were delivered with the outer curved edge. It inflicted terrible wounds, severed limbs, and wooden shields and bronze armor offered no protection against it. No less, if not greater, significance was the emergence of the composite bow. Egyptian composite bows were long, about 1.5 meters, and meticulously crafted from several layers consisting of goat horns, tendons of large horned animals bonded together with animal glue. The killing power of the composite bow reached 250-300 meters, being able to release each arrow in less than 2 seconds. This gave the composite bow rapid-fire capability and effective shooting range comparable to firearms. It's no wonder it proved extremely effective on the battlefield. The strings of composite bows were made of tightly woven animal guts, and the arrows were made of wooden reeds with bronze tips. To increase accuracy, the feathers of the arrows were triple barbed. However, it should be noted that the composite bow was extremely expensive, and not everyone had access to it. Only chariot archers and a small portion of infantry were armed with it. The majority of infantry remained equipped with simple bows of the old type. The most impressive and deadly new weapon of the New Kingdom was the chariot, the tank of the ancient world. The chariot consisted of a wooden platform, 1x0, 5 meters, on 2 wheels, to which a yoke was securely attached. The front part and sides of the chariot were covered with leather, protecting the legs of the crew from arrows. 2 horses were harnessed to the chariot. 2 people operated the battle chariot, the charioteer, who controlled the horses with reins and a whip, and the warrior, armed with a composite bow with arrows and several javelins. The chariot was a formidable weapon, but the Egyptian army used them in groups of more than 100 chariots, which were intended to break through the enemy's defense line. Defensive weaponry improved. In addition to shields, warriors also had helmets and leather armor with attached bronze plates. The most intricate protective armor was intended for the chariot crew, both the charioteer and the archer, as they represented significantly greater value than ordinary infantry. The armor could consist of over 600 individual scales attached to a linen or leather base. In the 13th century, iron weapons began to appear in the Egyptian army. After the Battle of Kadesh, in accordance with the terms of a peace treaty with the Hittites, craftsmen arrived in Egypt and taught the Egyptians how to manufacture iron weapons. However, this event did not have particularly significant consequences. Egypt lacked both iron ore and a sufficient amount of wood for making charcoal needed for iron smelting. After the fall of the New Kingdom, there were no significant innovations. Egyptians gradually adopted weapon designs from neighboring peoples, and thus lived until the Persian Conquest, which marked the end of ancient Egyptian civilization. Goodbye.